Having a big set of shoulders can really widen the appearance of the upper body and complement the V-taper effect that most of us are after. It's one of the first things that's notable on your physique, whether you're wearing a t-shirt or not, since it beefs up your physique from pretty much every angle. Yet, when it comes to shoulder training in general, there are a couple of mistakes that are made too often, which actually diminish the ability to create a juicy set of delts. The first thing that comes to mind for most people when it comes to training shoulders is performing a shoulder press. And while it's definitely a solid choice to include in your training, to maximize the development of the anterior delt, it's not the only thing that you should be focusing on when trying to create a fully developed, well-proportioned set of shoulders. Reason being is that the shoulder is made up out of 3 muscles and not just the ones on the front of the shoulder. We have the anterior head, which lies on the front of the shoulder and performs shoulder flexion. The lateral head, which lies on the side of the shoulder, which performs shoulder abduction. And the posterior deltoid, which lies on the back of the shoulder, which performs horizontal shoulder abduction. So just doing some presses won't cut it if you want to grow the entire shoulder department. Now, as I said, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be performing any shoulder press movements whatsoever. Since the anterior deltoid mostly gets stimulated by performing pressing movements, you can opt to perform a compound type exercise like the standing barbell overhead press. Compound movements in general are going to be your best bet most of the time, since they are very suitable for progressive overload, which is a necessary component to growing any muscle in the human body. The overhead press is a solid exercise to create a solid, strong set of shoulders. So when setting up for this exercise, there are a couple of things that you need to know in order to perform it in the safest way possible and to ensure that you're more than able to load some weight up in the most effective way. Now, when going to perform the overhead press, focus on unracking the bar with your elbows in line with your torso, with your scapula retracted. Squeeze your glutes together to create a stable base for your spine and for balance at the top of the press. Take a deep breath when you're unracking the weight before you're going to be pressing the weight up. Then press the weight up explosively, and once the bar surpasses your head, press your head through the bar in order to create a straight bar path. Now, in order to allow for a full range of motion, on the way back, let the bar travel to your upper chest before starting another rep again. Now, there are lots of other exercises to choose from when wanting to target the anterior delts. There isn't really a quote-unquote must-do exercise, since the muscle only knows tension. It doesn't know the difference between performing a standing barbell overhead press or a dumbbell shoulder press. Now, if you choose to opt for a different type of shoulder press, a lot of the same principles will still apply. Whether seated or standing, create a solid base of support, retract the scapula, press the weight up, and control the weight on the eccentric part of the movement. The anterior deltoid will create a well-developed shoulder when viewed from the side, but when wanting to create a well-developed shoulder from the front, you should be focusing on developing the lateral head of the deltoid. Now, the lateral head, or also known as the side delt, is primarily targeted through shoulder abduction. Now, a great way to memorize this is to think of the arm being abducted, as in away from the body. This will go for pretty much any exercise that targets the lateral delt. Now, there are, of course, lots of variations that you can choose from, but it's safe to say that the best exercise to go for is the side raise. Now, you can choose to go for a cable side raise or a dumbbell side raise, or to simply alternate them throughout the week to get the best out of both exercises. A cue that's quite commonly referred to, but has to be performed with caution, is the pinkies up method. Since the fibers of the lateral deltoid are in a better line of pull with the weight, if you're putting your shoulders into internal rotation, you're putting slightly more tension on the side delt. However, since it's also commonly known as a cue that can cause shoulder impingement or shoulder issues in general, perform this one with caution. If it feels good and you get a better contraction without any pain whatsoever, then by all means just go for it. However, if it hurts or feels uncomfortable, then it's probably not worth the increased risk of injury. And when it comes to the side raise, keep your arms straight but not fully locked to keep your arm muscles out of the exercise. Bring your arms all the way up to 90 degrees, so not lower or higher than that, since peak contraction of the side delt takes place at 90 degrees. Going lower than 90 degrees will yield in slightly less lateral deltoid activation, and going higher than 90 degrees will only shift the majority of the tension to the upper trapezius. So it's safe to say that 90 degrees will most likely be your best bet. Another way to perform this exercise to put the most amount of tension on the lateral delt is to lean away slightly and to tilt your body a bit more sideways towards the arm that you're going to be performing the side raise with. Since the rotator cuffs generate the most amount of tension from the beginning position of the side raise, approximately for the first 15 to 20 degrees, you're better able to keep the tension on the side delt by leaning away just slightly. Now these are all just variations that you can try out for yourself to get the most out of your lateral deltoid training. Now as an extra exercise that can be really good for packing on some extra volume for the lateral deltoids is the upright row. This exercise gets a lot of bad credit since it can cause shoulder impingement for a lot of people, even though if it's performed correctly, not only can this be prevented, but it's also an exercise that you can greatly grow your side delts with. You often hear people claiming to simply perform the exercise like the way it's named, rowing it straight up. This is what can cause shoulder issues, since you're not putting your shoulder blades in a favorable position to actually stimulate the side delts. To perform this exercise correctly, focus on pulling the weight up and back, kind of as if you're rowing it in an arc. So you're virtually pulling the weight more towards your face instead of towards your eyesight in front of you. Now when it comes to setting up for the upright row, grip the bar outside of shoulder width and pull the elbows up and back. That way you will get the most amount of side delt stimulation out of this exercise. Now you also see a lot of people gripping the bar very close together. However, this is something that can also cause some wrist issues, so your best bet is to grip the bar outside of shoulder width in order to prevent any types of pain or injuries. Now if the bar is still something that is not treating your shoulders or wrists very well, then try performing it with dumbbells, since that allows for a more free range of motion. Now the side delt is definitely very important to create the overall aesthetics of your shoulder in general. However, the one deltoid head that gets the least amount of attention, for pretty much all the wrong reasons, is the posterior head of the deltoid. Since the rear deltoid makes up for a quite good part of the deltoid development in general, it's important to give quite some attention to it in your training. Despite the fact that it's a neglected muscle group by the majority of the people doing the exercises that I'm going to be covering right now. Now, as I mentioned, the main function of the posterior deltoid is horizontal shoulder abduction. But just by performing this movement pattern, you're not going to be stimulating the posterior deltoid maximally. What you have to keep in mind as well is the positioning of your scapula. Two exercises that I want to focus on to target the rear deltoid to your best capability are the rear delt fly and the face pull. One of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make when trying to target their rear delt is that they retract their scapula the same way as they were to perform a chest fly or a back exercise. The rear delt generates the most amount of tension if you do the exact opposite of that, which means you have to put your scapula into protraction, meaning that you'll let your scapula come forward instead of pulling it back. Now I get why a lot of people don't do this, as you pretty much constantly hear people preaching you have to keep your scapula retracted, but for the rear delts, stop doing that and protract the shoulders. Reason being, when you retract your shoulders, you're going to be targeting the rear delts somewhat, but the majority of the tension will be put on the back musculature, since the main muscles that are responsible for scapular retraction are the trapezius muscles. So by keeping your scapula protracted, you'll isolate the rear deltoids to your best capabilities. Now for the rear delt fly, focus on, as I mentioned, keeping your scapula in protraction. Bring your arms back till they're in a horizontal line with your torso. Hold a good squeeze at peak contraction and slowly bring them back to the beginning position, always maintaining a slight degree of tension with the weight at the end of the eccentric motion. Now as with the side raises, you can opt for a dumbbell rear delt fly, a cable rear delt fly. As long as you're performing the same movement pattern and keeping the biomechanical aspects for all of these exercises in check, you can always opt for your favorite rear delt variation. The last exercise that I want to shine a light on is the face pull. It's not an exercise that you're solely targeting the rear delts with, since it's kind of a triple threat exercise. The rear delts, the side delts, the upper trapezius and the rotator cuff muscles come to play when it comes to the face pull. Of course, it depends on how you perform this exercise, since you can perform it in a way that targets more of the rear delts and the traps, and in a way that it strengthens the rotator cuff more. But all in all, it still targets all of these muscles to a certain degree, regardless of how you execute the exercise. You can perform this exercise with an overhand grip or an underhand grip, so I'd advise you to simply try out what feels most comfortable for you and stick to that grip. When performing a face pull, try to emulate doing a back double biceps pose to create a full range of motion. Keep a squeeze at the top of the movement and slowly control the weight on the eccentric part of the movement. You can choose to pull the weight a little bit more to your forehead or a little bit more towards your eyeside, and again this mostly comes down to what feels most comfortable for you and what area you want to put the most amount of attention towards. This is an exercise that you don't really need to go that heavy on, since it's meant to isolate the rear deltoids and the rotator cuff muscles. So you're better off focusing more on the contraction of the muscles instead of explosiveness. So now that we know all of the exercises necessary to create a big set of shoulders, let's go over the rep range. Now in terms of the rep ranges for all of the three shoulder heads, I would advise you to focus on a moderate to high rep range. Given that the anterior deltoid gets targeted mostly with compound exercises, you're better off sticking to the 8 to 12 rep range, really focusing on getting stronger on your exercise selection to promote a great degree of overload, since that is what compound lifts are best suited for. For the lateral deltoid, I'd advise you to stick to the 10 to 20 rep range, since it is a smaller muscle that gets targeted mostly through isolation exercises, which can be pretty injury sensitive if performed too heavy with lower reps. And the same goes for the posterior deltoid. The 10 to 20 rep range will allow you to really focus on the muscle that you're targeting, allowing you to really get a good stretch and contraction of the muscle without increasing your risk of injury, since shoulder injuries are more common than not in the fitness scene. And that is probably not without reason. So all in all, perform these exercises in your training routine 2 to 3 times per week with a focus on progressive overload on your exercise selection, and you'll be on your way to create a good set of well-developed delts. Alright, and that is all for this video guys. I sincerely hope you all enjoyed. If you thought this video was informative and helped you out in any way, shape or form, then please consider hitting the like button, because it really helps out the channel grow and helps spread the video out to a lot more people. Comment down below on what you liked and what you would like to see next. Subscribe to the channel for so much more content coming really soon. I'm out guys, and peace out. See you in the next one.